All right, we're about to dive into one of the most dramatic turning points in the entire history of the Crusades, the fall of Jerusalem. This is a story about how a kingdom crumbles and the absolutely incredible leader who made it happen. For almost 100 years, a Christian kingdom, born from the First Crusade, had held the Holy City. But in 1187, well, that all came to a spectacular end. This isn't just a story about a siege, though. It's the story of the man who would change the course of history. So, to really get how Jerusalem fell, you have to understand just how fragile this kingdom was. I mean, the Crusader states were basically a foreign project in a hostile land, and by the late 12th century, the cracks were really starting to show. After the First Crusade, the victors carved out these four territories right on the coast. You gotta picture them as a kind of European foothold in the Middle East, just a thin line of castles and cities, clinging to the edge of a vast and powerful Muslim world. But then, in 1144, bam, the first domino falls. The northernmost state, Edessa, gets captured. This was a huge shock. For the very first time, an entire Crusader state had been wiped off the map. It sent a wave of absolute terror through the Christian world, and, you can imagine, a surge of hope through the Muslim world. But here's the fascinating part. Both sides were a total mess. The Crusaders were being led by these reckless, greedy nobles who were constantly squabbling. At the same time, the Muslim states were fighting each other just as much as they were fighting the Crusaders. It seemed like neither side had what it took to actually win. Jerusalem's king at the time, a guy named Amaric, he's looking around at this precarious situation and thinks he's found the silver bullet: Egypt. If he could just conquer the richest state in the whole region, he could use its wealth and manpower to secure their kingdom for good. And he became completely obsessed with this idea. Between 1163 and 1169, Amaric launched 5 separate invasions of Egypt. 5! This constant attacking really signaled to everyone, especially the Muslim powers in Syria, just how incredibly valuable that prize was. And you can totally see why he was so fixated on it. Egypt wasn't just another territory. It was filthy rich from the Nile. It had a massive population. Controlling it would basically create a Crusader superpower. It would have been a game-over moment for any real challenge to their rule in the Holy Land. And it's right here, in the middle of all this chaos over Egypt, that our main character walks onto the stage. Salah ad-Din, who we know as Saladin. But he wasn't some ambitious warlord, no. He was this young Kurdish officer who had to be practically dragged along by his uncle. He literally said he wouldn't go even if they offered him the kingship of Egypt. So how in the world does this reluctant officer become a sultan? Well, he becomes the very thing the Muslim world had been desperately waiting for, a leader who could finally unite them and turn the tide against the Crusaders. You see, unlike the other feuding warlords of the time, Saladin cultivated a totally different image. He was seen as pious, humble, generous. He lived a simple life and just projected this aura of justice that earned him the trust and, honestly, the deep admiration of the common people. His rise to power was just his masterclass in patience and shrewd politics. When his uncle dies in 69, he's made the Wazir of Egypt, basically because the court thinks he'll be an easy puppet to control. Oh, were they wrong. Then, in 1174, a massive power vacuum opens up and he seizes the opportunity. Over the next decade, he methodically unites Syria, and it all culminates in the capture of Aleppo in 1183. The puppet had become the puppet master. And just like that, the Crusaders' absolute worst nightmare had become a reality. For the first time, a single, powerful, and very popular ruler was in control of both Egypt and Syria. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was now caught in a giant strategic vice. So, the strategic stage is set, but this final confrontation for Jerusalem isn't just going to be a clash of armies. It's going to be a clash of leaders. And wow, what a contrast. On one side, you've got Jerusalem's king, Baldwin IV. They called him the Leper King, and he was this brilliant strategist who, despite his horrible illness, commanded huge respect and had actually fought Saladin to a standstill. And on the other side, you have Raynald de Chatillon, a treacherous, greedy, reckless warlord who only cared about plunder. Now, Baldwin, this brilliant king, actually managed to secure a truce with Saladin. It was a fragile peace, but it might have held. But Raynald? He just couldn't help himself.
From his desert castle, he kept attacking and massacring civilian caravans for profit. Every time it happened, Saladin would appeal to King Baldwin, but the poor dying king was just powerless to control this rogue commander. A major war was now basically guaranteed.
So after Baldwin IV finally dies from his illness, this incompetent and arrogant guy, Guy de Lusignan, becomes king. Saladin sees this weak leader take charge, he's totally fed up with the provocations, and he knows this is it, this is the moment. Now Saladin was facing the biggest army the Kingdom of Jerusalem had ever put in the field. He knew a straight-up, head-on battle was risky, so instead of relying on just brute force, he decided to use the landscape and the minds of his enemies against them. He laid this simple but absolutely deadly trap. First, he besieges Tiberias, creating a target the Crusaders just can't ignore. This forces their entire army to march across a bone-dry plain in the blistering July heat. Then, just as they're staggering towards the Sea of Galilee, Saladin moves his forces and cuts them off from the only water for miles. He was literally using the sun as a weapon. And the result was exactly what he'd planned. The Crusader army, baking inside their heavy metal armor, was tormented by heat and a maddening thirst. Their morale just completely fell apart. Meanwhile, Saladin's army, they're rested, they're hydrated, and they're holding all the good ground. The battle was basically won before a single sword was drawn. On July 4th, the Crusader army was annihilated. In the aftermath, Saladin has the captured King Guy and Reynold de Chatillon brought to his tent. He actually shows the king mercy, offers him a cup of iced water. But when Guy passes the cup to Reynold, Saladin makes it crystal clear that his hospitality did not extend to the man who broke every treaty. He executed Reynold on the spot, a brutal end for a brutal man. With its entire army gone, either captured or killed at Hattin, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was completely defenseless. The city itself braced for a siege, absolutely terrified of a repeat of the horrific massacre that happened when the First Crusade took the city 88 years before. But what happened next is what really cemented Saladin's legacy forever. He knew all about the massacre the Crusaders had committed in 1099, and he chose a completely different path. After a pretty short siege, he accepted the city's surrender. He spared the population, he allowed the citizens to ransom themselves, and he even used his own money to free the poorest people. It was a calculated, powerful act of mercy over vengeance. So Saladin had done the impossible. He had retaken Jerusalem. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. The news hits Europe like a thunderclap, and in response, the three most powerful kings in Christendom, Frederick Barbarossa, Philip Augustus, and Richard the Lionheart, all agree to go on crusade. A new, even bigger conflict was about to begin. The war for the Holy Land was far from over.